and now a lot of new Supreme Court justices. We have a lot of cases getting a lot more attention. And I wanted to provide a resource for teachers, especially, to have a way to talk about this in a way that's age appropriate, right? Because we don't want to get all into the politics. There's all kinds of laws now being passed that's making it really difficult to have some conversations. And so I wanted to create a nice little resource. And so that's kind of like my journey. I, first generation lawyer, you have to figure everything out on your own. As much as my parents love me, they like, I've never done this. I have no idea. Like just even getting to college, then getting into law school, then passing the exam, then getting a job, then once you get the job, it's like you start all over again because you really have to figure out how to practice law after you graduate law school. It's two steps. You're learning the law in law school, then you graduate. It's
Mhm.
like, okay, now I have to actually figure out how to do this thing with all the knowledge that I have. And so whenever I've gone through the journey, I've had people to help me, and I've always kind of said, when I'm in a position to help other people coming behind me, I'm going to make sure that I do everything I can. So the books, the nonprofit, even being a professor is all about giving back and helping to create a path and illuminate the path for people who want to take the same journey.
Well, for those who are watching us live, this is PharSide Pholios. We are here with Joseline Hardrick as she talks about her newest book. It's the Law, the U.S. Constitution from A to Z. And it is a children's book. It is a beautifully designed children's book, wonderful artwork and pictures, diverse character images. And she just talked about her own journey towards being a lawyer and her background as an educator in the academic spaces. Can you tell us, like, maybe since you've got A to Z, so without giving the whole book away, are there like one or two like key terms that stick out to you, or our favorite lines for you from your story?
Yes, well, I was actually a public school teacher, elementary. I taught poetry in the Bronx at Jonathan Hyatt Elementary many moons ago, just one year. So first of all, shout out to all the teachers. Wow, that was hard. I was really bad at classroom management. I was. I loved the kids, and but I just couldn't quite, get them all to sit down and do the work. But the one time that I could get, everyone focused was when I read a book aloud. I mean, honestly, even as an adult, we like being read to, don't we? So that's kind of, I just wanted to put that in there because you said the academic space, but I'm like, I know what it's like to be in that K-5 classroom. And I taught poetry, which I loved because the kids always loved it. We've always made it fun. And so that's why my books always have rhyme. And so in this one, some key terms, really easy takeaways, right? So C is for Congress, right? So they can remember that. Congress has two houses, the Senate. So S is for Senate, H is for House of Representatives. And I tell them each state gets two senators. Each the House grows with the country. So they're learning a lot of different concepts about the government. P is for president, right? He gets to execute the laws. And J is for the judicial branch. They get to interpret the laws. The three branches of government is one of those things kids can grasp very easily. So we cover the three branches and what they do. And my favorite line is Z. And it's funny because my best friend, picked up the book and said, I always want to know what Z stands for. Because Z is such a hard letter, right, to find words. So Z is for zealous. Zealous protection of our right to be free, fairness, and justice for all is our guarantee. So for me, that sums up the dream of the United States and why we formed this nation and why people like my parents immigrate here. Because although, we're still working on how do we make sure everyone really does get access to the fairness and the justice and the freedom that we talk about, the mere fact that the founders and the current government still wants that to be our goal is enough to motivate us to come and work together. And that is the big message I want kids to get from this book.
Now, not only do you have the story of the Constitution from A to Z, but is you have also an alphabet workbook for K2. Why was that necessary? A necessary tool to add to this project?
So I actually have it from pre-K to K and K to
Hmm.
2. So I
Hmm.
have two of them.
Okay.
I wanted the students to have, again, a way to engage with the material after they hear the reading. And I made it so that you can get the print version, or if you're a teacher and educator, you can get the PDF and just print out whatever pages you want to
Hmm.
use to give to the students. Lawyers and judges, again, we do a lot of classroom visits and read alouds, and this is a great little thing you can give as a gift to the class. And the teacher can either photocopy it or you can buy several copies. And then what they do is they practice the alphabet, right? So the pre K to K has letter identification and they can write out the letters. It also has the pictures from the book itself, all the illustrations, so that each letter is a character. And then the K through 2 has the letter identification, writing the letters, and also writing out the words. So for those students who are more sophisticated and more versed in handwriting, they can use that version. And if you're not sure where your kid falls, just buy both of them, and see which one works better for them. And my son, he struggles a little bit with handwriting. So even though he's entering third grade, he could probably still use the through 2 one. So, students are come at different levels, and I always recognize that. And so I wanted to allow different versions for parents and teachers to have available for their kids to interact with it. So it helps reinforce, the
Hmm.
lessons that they learn from the book.
Yeah. So how how much of your how did your background influence the writing of the book? I mean, because this is writing for adults versus what writing for children, you would seem to be a whole kind of different animal or process. So how did this come about for children?
It's interesting when we teach law students how to write legal briefs, motions,
Hmm.
things like that. We always tell them, write like you're talking to an 8-year-old, right? Keep it simple. And so because I'm used to doing that, how do I take these very complicated concepts and break it down like I'm talking to an 8-year-old? It's actually very easy for me to write children's books because of that, because I take these concepts, okay, this big concept called the Constitution, this big thing called freedom, this thing called three branches of government. How do I explain that to a kid? And my brain just is already trained to do that. And then I love rhyme and rhythm and alliteration, and I don't know, it's a little the nerdy side of me really likes that. And so I use, even with my law students, it's like, listen, if you have to memorize stuff, create a mnemonic device, turn it into a song, do all those things. When I was a elementary school teacher, we did a lot of that, helping with the multiple choice tables, using a rap or a rhyme, using songs. It really just helps you remember. I even did that in law school. And so my
Hmm.
brain just already works that way. And so it becomes really easy for me to do it. Also, it gives me a break from all the legal work and all the legal writing I do. This is something fun that I can do. Every time I sit down to write a children's book, hours fly by, and I'm like, oh, I was only supposed to be spending an hour on this. I was like 3 hours, but it's just so much fun for me. So that's how they come about.
And this is not your only children's book, because you've written other children's books. So, how did you find yourself in the world of children other than having, taught at the elementary at some point in your career?
Like I said, when I read to the children, I really connected with them, and I from that was 2002. I had this dream of writing children's books, and I never took substantial steps. I like took a little online class. I got a workbook, and then I met someone that I was working with who was working for a judge, and I was pregnant. She gave me a book as a gift, and I saw her name on it. And I'm like, wait, you wrote this? She's like, yeah. And I'm like, well, and we talked about it, and she told me how easy it was. She explained the process, and so I just started thinking about it. And my son really inspired me actually, because I would take pictures and we'd have all these adventures and we'd go to the park and go to the zoo, and kids, when they talk, you see things from their point of view. And so my first book was about my son and spending time with him. And from there, they just started to flow. The stories just come. watching him grow up. One of our books actually is based on a conversation we had when I was giving him a bath. It's called Mommy Magic versus Robot Power, right? Because we're debating who's more powerful, robots or mommies. And then again, when I visit schools, I've been doing that since before I was a parent, visiting middle schools and elementary schools. Um, my local bar association, which is like the group of attorneys, um, had a program called Read to Dream, where we'd go to certain schools where the students were struggling with reading. And they found that just having us come on one afternoon a week reading to them increased their reading scores. So we started doing that. And again, we read great books, but I'm like, we're lawyers. Why don't we have books about lawyers that we can read to the students so that they know what it is that we do? Because you try to explain what a lawyer does or what a judge does, it can be really hard for a student to understand. So one of the other books I wrote is called All Rise at the Courthouse. And this one is great because it's a little girl who goes to work with her mom and who works at the courthouse. And she gets to meet all the people who work there and find out what they do. And at the end, she gets a great surprise when she finds out what her mom does. And so it's really easy way for me to explain, okay, this is what I do, right? And so some of it is just practicality, and some of
Mhm.
it is just, the creative side of me that wants to express itself. And I just use the children's books to do that. But I have over a dozen books at this point, and if we had more time, I'd tell you about all of them because they're all my babies. But
And
those are the two that have to do with the law. So
yeah, and I think, and given the times, our current times, and and children watch the news, they see the news, they scroll now, of course, through their social media, let's grab mommy's phone or let's grab dad's phone, and they know to swipe left or right and up and down, to see what's going on, and they listen to the radio and all those kinds of things. So having something that gives them perspective and gives them
mhm.
more detail than just a sound bite, I think is very important. So, what are your thoughts as to, writing about, what you do as a lawyer and writing about the Constitution, because it is a big kind of talk in the news, as you hear in politics, are always talking about it's my constitutional right
Yeah.
and those kinds of things, and our founding fathers. So we hear that a lot, by our politicians, and our kids hear it. But if they don't have a connection, so what are your thoughts on that?
I hear a lot of people talk about the Constitution and their rights. Most of them haven't read the Constitution, unfortunately. My students, the first assignment is read the whole Constitution. I bet you've never done that before. And they still don't. They wait for me to kind of go through. People know their freedom of speech and freedom of religion, but they really, and it's okay to have all these opinions, but it has to start from somewhere. And that place is the Constitution. So I'm kind of like, okay, what can I do to help this conversation? It's create resources that are easy to access. So the book is not just for kids, it's for the adults reading it to them, right? They're like, oh, yeah, that's in the Constitution. Or, I'll tell people and they're like, that's not in there. I'm like, yes, it is. You just got to, you know, get through all that dense stuff in Article 1, Article
Mhm.
2, Article 3. People just skip all that stuff and go straight to my freedom of speech and freedom to bear arms. And those are the ones that are always in the news.
Mhm.
And so for me, this is like, okay, let me just give a resource, when Justice Jackson was going through her
Mhm.
confirmation, that was all over the news, and a lot of people saw her image, right? And she's like me, she's a Black woman, she has locks like me, and I'm
Mhm.
like, wow, talk about representation. And so the book, All Rise at the Courthouse, the mom looks like me, right? She has
Mhm.
locks, she has dark skin, and I want people to understand, yes, we practice law too, we are judges too. I want to normalize having people of different backgrounds being seen in these roles because all the imagery when Justice Jackson was getting confirmed showed how long it took before a Black woman became a
Mhm.
Supreme Court justice. There were over 100 justices before she came, and then before Justice Sotomayor, right? There was no
Mhm.
Hispanic. Before Justice Thurgood Marshall, there were no black people. Before
Mhm,
Justice Scalia, there were no, Catholics. Before certain justices, there were no Jewish people.
mhm,
So the representation really matters. And so, since I am a black woman, I'm also, a child of immigrants. English is my
mhm,
second language. Um, that's the perspective I speak from. Even though I'm talking about something lots of people talk about. People talk about the Constitution, they talk about law, but I'm bringing it from my point of view so that young people can hear it from the point of view of someone with my background, and those who share it can feel seen and heard as well. And so, I have to be careful too. In writing the book, I'm like, okay, I want this to be used in schools. And now, there's all these laws about what can be taught and what can't
mhm,
be taught. The buzzwords that are going around right
mhm.
now about that.
Yeah.
So I had to be careful, right? I said, okay, try to make it as neutral and honest as possible, but still the theme of unity, community, freedom for all, inclusiveness, because we are a multicultural and
Mhm,
multiracial democracy. That needs to
mhm,
be reemphasized. There's been some steps to kind of de-emphasize that, and I'm like, no,
mhm.
we're not going backwards. We're going forward. Okay, all of us contributed to being here and making the country what it is. And so we want to make sure that not just the founding fathers get recognized, but everyone else who contributed as well.
So, what is it that you hope that the young readers will take away from this book? Is definitely something that should be, in classroom libraries. You think about the curriculum is when they hit these points in history, whether it's like fourth grade, American history, fourth or fifth grade, or and then going into high school, 11th grade. That was when we had government. Um, uh, that's when I remember having to um, memorize the Bill of Rights.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
so that was then, and of course there's been some changes. So what are some things that you just hope that readers will take away now that you've produced something that hopefully teachers, I'll shout out to all my teachers going back to school or who are already back in session. Definitely you want to pick up this title to add to your classroom library. um, it's the law of the U.S. Constitution from A to Z. So mark that book, catch the replay. If you're watching us live, look at the links down at the bottom so you'll see where to find our author. But what is something that you hope that readers will take away?
I hope the readers will take away that it's important that they're engaged in our democracy, right? It's really unique how the United States works, and that it was one of the first nations to even try this big experiment. And I think one of the things that has really just hit a lot of young people is they think, oh, my vote doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if I pay attention to who's running. It doesn't matter if I what laws are being passed. And in recent times, they're seeing, oh, wait, it really does matter. Unfortunately, a lot of people realize that too late once they're being negatively impacted. And so, what they have to realize is it is an ongoing process to participate in our government. And it really is crucial that we all participate and all our voices get heard. And it makes a difference. And so, I want to encourage young kids to start doing that early and to encourage their adults to do the same.
Okay, now, um, do you have any other works in the process or anything you can give us a teaser about? Any future projects that you might have in the works?
Oh, yeah. Right now, I am working on more workbooks and books about community helpers. So, this
Hmm.
idea of, there are certain professions that really help out our community and professions in general. And the reason why I'm working on these books, again, I go to a lot of classrooms and I talk about, being a lawyer, but not everyone wants to be a lawyer, and that's okay, right? But there's all these great ways to help our community. There's all these kinds of jobs that young people can get involved with. And I'm also creating more alphabet workbooks. So I have one coming up for another A to Z book I have. It's called Curly Me from A to Z. celebrating all the different types of curls and hair textures. And I love your hair. So, your hair texture is represented, my hairstyle is represented. And so it's going to come with a workbook as well. So my son always brings these workbooks and worksheets home, and it really helps emphasize the lessons. It helps him practice his alphabet, but it also just more representation, more beautiful images, more illustrations and diversity. So those are going to be coming out soon. I'm also making my ebooks available outside of Amazon.com because most of
Mm-hmm.
my books right now are on that platform just because they make it really easy to publish because I'm a
Mm-hmm.
self-publisher. But I found a way to kind of make at least the ebooks available through EPUB and PDF on my website.
Mm-hmm.
And I also one more thing, Great American Teaching coming up in a couple of months. I have some free resources on my website. I have a free video on YouTube explaining what lawyers do. It's great for elementary, middle, or high school. I've used it for all three, and you can use the snippet that you want to use. And I have some free worksheets to go with them: crossword puzzles, word searches, and different little puzzles. Again, to help the students get engaged, and it's a great way to review the material they covered without it feeling like a super formal lesson. So, JocelynHardrick.com, that's a great place to find all those resources.
Okay. So what are some things, I mean, you've written for children on a range of different topics, and of course you have your work that you've done to help um, students, graduate students, pass the bar, and that the work through that whole that
Yeah.
whole process,
Mhm.
of attaining um, that educational degree. What is something else that you'd be interested in exploring with your writing?
I also explore a lot of mindfulness with my writing. So diversity is one big issue I'm passionate about, but mindfulness as well, because becoming a lawyer is hard. It's so hard. And when I was a teacher, I was like, this is really hard. Teachers I was putting in a lot of hours. And then the
Mhm.
same thing again as a lawyer. And of course, they're not paid the same, which is, a shame. Pay teachers what they're worth for their level of education and the work that they do. Yes, right. Amen to
Right?
that.
Amen.
Yes.
Amen.
Um, so mindfulness, I think, is really important for kids, especially with COVID and all the stuff that happened there. And all professionals, anyone just living life, people with young kids. I have a 4-month-old, so the lack of sleep and the stress that can come with that. Mindfulness is really important to me. So I have a book called The Butterfly Hug for kids, and it's about using this simple technique to help calm yourself down if you're starting to feel anxious. I have Finding Joy in a Journey to Esquire. That's for law students and lawyers to help them explore mindfulness as a way to make the law something they enjoy. Because when you're super stressed out, you don't
Mhm.
enjoy your work. And it's like, wait a minute, I did 4 years for my bachelor's, 3 years for law school, took this monster exam, and you mean I don't even enjoy the work I'm doing, right? That's where I was.
Mhm.
And so these books are very personal to me because I'm talking about myself. I'm talking to myself, and I'm giving strategies that worked for me personally. And it's the same thing. So I take the stuff I use for adults and I try to turn it into something that kids can access and use. And what I really like is that these are techniques you can implement right away. This isn't like a 5-year plan, right? This is right
Mhm.
now. Here's something you can do. The butterfly hug, where you tap your shoulders, right, and your hands kind of look like a butterfly, calms you down within a few minutes. Um, my renewal process and finding joy in the journey to Esquire are things you can implement right away to help you get perspectives and express gratitude, right? Get more sleep and just get calm. You can see straight and like, oh yeah, this I dreamed about this moment and worked really hard. Let me make sure I enjoy it. Sometimes we just forget because we're so caught up in the minutia of life that we forget that we're supposed to be enjoying it too. So I want to build more on the mindfulness. I'm creating little kind of mini courses for people who want to go
Mhm.
a little deeper. And I'm also looking to create a mini course for people who want to self publish children's books because this journey has been a journey of learning, making mistakes, having certain successes. And then again, I want to illuminate the path for someone else, a busy professional who's just like, I always wanted to write a children's book. And so they can
Mhm.
pick up my course and start writing it right away.
So, what have you learned about yourself through this process of writing and self publishing?
I learned that I need a creative outlet. I did not realize how much I needed it. Because like I said, I was like, let me work for an hour during my lunch break on this book, and then 3 hours would fly by because I enjoyed it so much. So if you're really busy and stressed, creative outlets are going to be a great way to spend your time. And you might feel like I don't have time to spend an hour doing something creative, but that hour doing something creative makes the other 7 to 8 hours much more enjoyable. You look forward to your creative time, and so you'll kind of get through your work so you can do that creative activity. I have a lot of ideas too. Like every time I write a book, I get an idea for another one. I get an idea for everyone's like, "How are you writing all these books?" I'm like, they just come to me. Sometimes if you calm yourself down, I do a lot of meditation. I did one this
Mhm.
morning to prepare for this interview. The ideas will just come to you. You don't have to try so hard. I've heard that from like people who write music or perform or sing, and they're like, I just quieted my mind and it just like revealed itself to me. And it sounds weird until it happens to you, but that's really how the books come to me. And then one was just like I said, sitting in the tub with my son. We're talking about mommies and robots, and the whole book came out of the conversation. And we didn't have to try. I just said this would make a great book, and I wrote it down. I'm like, it did make a great book, and off it was and it's published. So, there's more creativity within you than you think. And I've definitely found that out about myself that the more I express my creativity, the more joy I feel in my life and the easier my other work becomes, even if it's really boring, tedious work. So, lawyers do a lot of that, a lot of it, and it surprises people. They think we're in the courtroom all the time, and it's this big
Mhm.
drama like on TV. It's like no, it's a lot of reading and writing actually. Um, so yeah, you got to balance that out.
So when I say that representation matters, and you talked about unity, you talked about community helpers, you know, inclusivity, and when I say representation matters, what does that mean, especially for a story like It's the Law?
Earlier we talked about the founding fathers. You ask anyone about the Constitution in the U.S., it's the founding fathers. Yes, they were the founding fathers. They were the men who came together, drafted the Declaration of Independence, and signed the Constitution. But all these people were around them supporting them. All of these women were involved in that process. Black people were involved in building the Washington, D.C. and designing it. Frederick Douglass played a huge role in the creation of this country and the concepts that we hold dear now. Um, Indigenous people, Asian people have been here for centuries helping to build this country. So representation means in the book, I have all these different skin tones, right? All these different types of clothing indicating things like religion and culture. I have different hair textures so that children really understand, okay, it's not just the images that I've been shown. All these people are playing a role then, and they're playing a role now, which means that I have to play a role now, right? I have to engage when I grow up. Because if you keep thinking it's only a certain group of people who are responsible for everything, then you don't see yourself in it, and it might be harder for you to decide to get engaged. But if you learn, oh no, all these people played a role, we all play a role now, and so can I. It just becomes this easier mental step. It's not this huge jump anymore. And again, Katanji Brown Jackson, I mean, she's just been such an inspiration. It's just
Mhm.
this big celebratory moment. But man, if you watch those confirmation hearings, it was tough. It was tough. It was an
Mhm.
uphill battle for her. And but she made it through. And we have people like Hillary Clinton being the first female presidential candidate. We have Kamala Harris being the first um, vice president and Indian and someone of Indian and African descent. I mean, young people are growing up seeing this. There is a whole generation of young people who remember a black president, for 8 years.
Mhm,
That blows my
mhm,
mind when I realize that there's a generation of young people, right? Because before that, it was like, yes, it was always an older white male. And so this idea that I could be president seems so far fetched. But now it's like,
mhm,
no, actually, look at all these people doing these things. You can
mhm,
do it too. It becomes much more realistic and attainable for young people. And hopefully it inspires people of all backgrounds, right?
mhm,
Um, Not just that specific group, because that's the point of the United States. You know, you have a chance.
mhm,
That's why my parents came here. No one guaranteed anything to them, right? And they knew there was going to be some problems. They faced discrimination, not just because
mhm,
of being immigrants and English second language learners, but also for being Black. But they were
mhm,
like, you know what? Here we have a chance.
mhm.
We have access to public school education. Haiti still doesn't have a public school education system to this day. And so my siblings and I were able to get public education. And now I'm a lawyer, which was, would have been a very far-fetched idea if they had stayed in Haiti. And so, that's why representation is important, because we all want that chance, and we're more likely to take the risks and do the work that's involved in getting to those positions if we think it's attainable, it's reachable, and we'll have more people aiming for it, which is what we need.
Mhm.
Lawyers represent us in civil matters, criminal matters, all kinds of things. And so the people who need lawyers come from all backgrounds. And so that means the lawyers themselves should reflect the community they serve, same as judges. So it's really important that we have more people, trying to attain those positions.
Well, for those who are watching us live and those who will catch the replay, I'm Monica Leek, host of PharSide Pholios. We've been here with Joseline Hardrick talking about it's the law, the Constitution from A to Z, something that you definitely want to pick up from for your young child or your middle schooler or your high schooler who may be taking government on this year might help them out a little bit. So, Ms. Hardrick, how would we follow you on social media? How can persons, get the book and um, catch up with what you're doing?
So I'm at JJ Hardrick on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. I'm on LinkedIn under Joseline Hardrick. I'm on Pinterest. I'm trying to keep up with all these social media platforms. I'm on as many of them as I can be on. YouTube, I have a lot of read alouds. So even if you're not able to buy the book, just go to my YouTube channel, listen to the read aloud with your kids, or you can play it if you're a teacher, play them in your classroom. And my website is Joseline Hardrick, my first and last name.com. All the resources are on there. So if you want to request a donation, there's a donation button. So if you're a teacher or a principal, school administrator, if you're a lawyer or judge and you want to donate a book to a classroom, please go on there and request it. And I donate to supply drives as well, school supply drives. So if someone wants a couple of the books to add to their libraries, just let me know.
That is awesome, especially for those teachers and educators and administrators who are just starting off the school year. It's great to have so a free resource or tool that we can have access to, especially when we're trying to make those lesson plans and fill in the blanks, so to speak, when we hit those social studies content areas. So, teacher friends, make sure you check this book out. I'd like to thank my guest, Joseline Hardrick, for spending time with us this morning on Farside Folios. Ms. Hardrick, we wish you continued success with It's the Law, the U.S. Constitution from A to Z, along with the workbooks and all the books that you have for children and all of the work that you're doing to help with diversifying what the law looks like with your teaching in the academic spaces and helping graduate students navigate law school and prepare for the bar. So we thank you for your time with us on this morning.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a great time.
Well, for all our viewers, we want to tell you, make sure you're staying tuned to the Farside Co-Ed Book Club Facebook page for more author interviews and posts as we celebrate this amazing August that had Romance Month, Poets Day, Book Lovers Day, and all the other wonderful literary days that we celebrate in the month of August. But until next time, many roots, many voices are a part of the infinite story. So plant your seed. Have a great day.